On today's episode,
the grand master of transformation himself, Tony Horton.
When you fall down, you got to get back up, and you have to do it over and over and over again.
how he transformed a mindset filled with fear
I was so depressed. I was afraid of everything almost all of the time.
into $1 billion fitness empire.
My purpose is to give other people their purpose.
How did you come upon that mindset? Like, it's so powerful.
And his new mission to transform people's lives and the home workout industry.
I opened up the blinders and I stopped caring about what other people thought of me.
It's time to go inside Quest with host Tom Bilyeu, president and co-founder of the second fastest growing private company in America. And now he's uncovering the universal principles of success.
I can tell you right now what principle number one is: follow your passion.
Inside Quest starts right now.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Inside Quest. Our goal here is to crack open the minds of the world's most powerful thinkers and mine their secrets to find out what makes them so damn efficient. We have got an amazing guest with us today. He is the grand master of transformation himself, the creator and star of P90X and many other things, the one, the only, Mr. Tony Horton. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me here today. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. So first, before we begin, I have to say a big thank you to Sean Callahan. Sean is the one that convinced this man to come on this program. It means a lot when somebody recommends somebody, and the coolest thing that hopefully one day will be said about me was said about you by Sean. And he said, the persona that you see is really this incredible guy who wants great things for other people, but the irony is he's even more like that off the camera. I'm also a transformation junkie like yourself, and for me that's the whole backbone of our company. It's the point of this show is really to help facilitate transformation. So thank you for your years of service in that battle. One thing that really frustrates me though as a transformation junkie is so many people have negative self-image, negative self-talk, and it defeats them before they even get started on the transformation. But that didn't happen to you. You grew up the scrawny kid, self-professed, right? I'm not making that up.
Oh, yeah.
Speech impediment, last pick for sports, but that didn't become a negative spiral for you. Somehow you've turned that into this incredible empire that you've built. What is different about the way that you think that's allowed you to have the kind of success that you've had?
It's been a long ride. It didn't happen overnight. You know, I think for most people that want to go through some form of transformation, I think their expectations are way too high, and I think that's the reason why they fail so often. They want something to happen overnight. You know, they figure if they go to some kind of a seminar or they read a book or they do a 90-day program that everything's going to change. And it really requires a combination of things, you know. I mean, one of my expressions, it's the first chapter in my new book, The Big Picture, do your best and forget the rest, you know. So when I was a wee lad and I expected, I expected to score 40 points and fly through the air and be a better athlete than everybody else, but I wasn't really doing the training, I wasn't really exercising. I had sort of this fantasy life that was very grand, but it wasn't cohesive with reality, you know. And so when you fall down a bunch of times and things don't turn out the way you want them to, there's a very great possibility, and this happens to people all across this country and around the world, that your world gets smaller and smaller, and then your expectations kind of go away, and then fear sort of takes over, and then you live sort of a very plain and mundane life where you really end up just kind of surviving. You're in that survival mode. And, you know, all your dreams and expectations and hopes and desires are dashed because you didn't understand early on that this is a process, that when you fall down, you got to get back up, and you have to do it over and over and over again. Now, for me, I just, because I was so miserable and because I was so unhappy and because I was so depressed and because I was such a bad athlete, there was always this little voice in my head that said, there's more, you know, there's more to life. You can be happier. There are things that you needed to do. So above and beyond what was happening at school, and there wasn't really much happening at school, you know, it was reading, writing, and arithmetic, but there wasn't really a lot of self-help. There wasn't a lot of courses on building your confidence. And because I was somebody who didn't exercise very often, who was sort of a wannabe athlete and who was living on fat, sugar, salt, and chemicals all the time, you know, the odds were stacked against me. I just didn't have the infrastructure, I didn't have the foundation to be able to continue to get better. But I went to a seminar, I read a self-help book. I moved from New England, where the only place you would find a gym would be at a local high school or at a college. You wouldn't find one on a corner. There were no bodybuilding gyms, no aerobic gyms. None of that existed. And so when I moved to California, the culture is just so different out here. And the first thing I did when I've had enough money was I joined a gym. And when I joined that gym, I started exercising. And when I started exercising, I went, whoa, that's fun. I never had that before, so my confidence went up. I didn't know at the time that...
Really fast, because in that, there's already a moment of hope, and I don't think a lot of people identify it. So to walk into a gym is a hopeful act. What was it that gave you the hope that you could change?
There were a lot of pretty women in there. And I was a fan of pretty women. I mean, honestly, it really was a way to meet people, because I was flat broke. I mean, I didn't have a dime. I was a trained pantomime, a very important skill. So I just want you all to know you should get out there and learn your walking in the wind. It could save your life. But that's what I'd have to do. I'd have to go down to the pier sometimes and throw a hat down and put my mime makeup on and make about $25 so I could live on Cheerios and yogurt for a while. Here's a kid who never graduated from college, who was willing to re-educate himself in new and interesting ways. And so going to the gym was one, going to seminars was another, reading these books was another. And so I was just slowly, carefully over the course of the first few years out here, just gathering intel that resonated with me, made me feel better about myself. But, the first 10 years was a big experiment, and everybody was saying, when are you going to come home? But I loved it out here. I loved the culture. I loved everything about it. So I hung in there.
What were you telling yourself about yourself as you're trying to acquire this new vision for what your life could become?
Well, I was beginning to learn that failure is part of the process, and that failure now is not long-term failure. I had to learn that lesson a bunch of times. One of the things, too, was beginning to surround myself with a different kind of people that I was surrounding myself with before. The naysayers and the wannabes and the bitchers and the whiners that had been in my life, I began to realize, why am I hanging out with you? Like, why are you in my life? Like, every time I'm with you, I feel bad. Every time I'm with you, I'm drunk at the end of the night. Right. This is horrible. And there was that very little optimistic voice that said, you got to find some new friends. And I found them at the gym. I found them at the track. I found them at aerobics class. I found them in the yoga class. I just found people who were living large. I used to hate to travel. I used to hate to be on a plane. I used to freak out about all that stuff. I was afraid of everything almost all of the time. And then I just found other people who weren't. And I thought to myself, well, they're not that different than I am. And if they can do it, I can do it. And like I said, this took years and years and years, and I'm still in that process. I'm still in that process of always willing to learn, always willing to grow, always willing to surround myself with mentors, coaches, and leaders that are living large.
One thing that I hear from successful people all the time is exactly that. I'm an eternal student. I'm always willing to learn. I'll take a good idea from wherever it comes. Things like that. And they clearly embody that. And so there's a sense of progression to their life. Just because I'm one way today does not mean that I have to be that same way tomorrow. How did you come upon that mindset? Like, it's so powerful. But what did you read it in a book? Did somebody say it? Did you just figure it out?
I didn't have any mentors or coaches when I was a kid. I had a football coach, this guy, and I barely made the team. I think I was more of a tackling dummy during the week, just so that the starters could run over a guy. You know what I mean? I should have quit the team, but I didn't want to. I just said, I'm going to hang in there no matter how miserable I was. The whole process of this drill sergeant mentality to help you be better, maybe that worked in the 50s and 60s, and for some athletes that still works. Didn't resonate with me. I didn't like to be told, no matter how hard I worked, how bad I was. I just thought, how am I supposed to grow and get better with this? And so it's a very frustrating process. And so I had to be self-taught. I had to go to the types of people, for example, my sophomore year of college, I took a weightlifting class, and I didn't really know much about it. But the reason why I loved that class, not because I saw the results that I was getting, because I loved the guy that was teaching it. And he was interesting, and he was thoughtful. And he didn't beat us up, he didn't scream and yell at us. He just showed us how to do it in a really fun and interesting way. When I came out to California, that was in my brain. Let me go to all the sources, people, places, things, events, seminars, that make me feel good in the moment, in the process of learning, and stray away from the ones that were all about beating me down and making it this rocket science process, which I hated.
You've talked about, you and I, in fact, talked about this before we started rolling, and you said one thing that's absolutely critical if you're going to be a soldier in the Army of Transformation is you've got to find a way to say things that people can actually hear so that the concepts have utility. I'm going to guess, based on that last story, what that concept for you is. Walk us through, what have you found works when you're touching someone who's at the very beginning of trying to transform and helping them through those early fragile days?
I think quite often it comes down to restructuring their focus, their raison d'etre, their reason for being, their why, And so in our society, if you look at the U.S. with this obesity crisis, with this healthcare crisis, why aren't more people making that transition? You did, I did. I mean, we didn't start out buff and fit and healthy and conscious of these things. There was a process, there was a learning process. And so, unfortunately, and a lot of this has to do with the media and advertising and a lot of companies that don't really care about people's health and wellness and more about selling their product. And people buy into it. And the other thing too is just making it fun. The fun factor is everything. And then helping people refocus where they need to put their attention. It's not about your appearance, your hopeful, optimistic thoughts and feelings about how you'd like to look in the future.
Right.
It's just making sure that I'm not attached to the outcome, that I'm not overwhelmed with the expectations,
right.
that I'm just here. And doing your best and forgetting the rest means today's best is going to be different than last week's, and it's going to be different than next week's. It's a 5 to 6 day a week process. And if you do it 5 or 6 days a week, your results might come in 30 days. They might come in 60, they might come in 90. Aesthetically, who cares? It's not about the scale. It's not about the tape measure. It's not about, your other people's opinions about your appearance. That's all this ephemeral baloney. What it's about is the fact that you've made physiological changes and shifts in the course of 10, 15, 20, 30, or an hour workout. And that you get that every time you do it, and you don't if you don't get it. But if you're struggling and you're doing what other people are doing and it's not working, then you got to tone it all down and just make it about consistency, more than anything.
You said something really interesting. It's a quote from you. Before I read the quote, are you familiar with The Dog Whisperer?
No. No,
all right, awesome show. Cesar Millan deals with dogs, and he said the reason I like dealing with dogs.
My fiance knows about that.
It's utterly fantastic, and some of the most powerful business principles come from The Dog Whisperer. I'm telling you right now, it's all true.
Crazy.
And if you work here, trust me, I've used Dog Whisperer techniques on all of you. The cool thing about that show, what he talks about is, this is Caesar saying it, I have a real hard time with humans because they live in the past and they live in the future. They don't live in the now. Dogs only live in the now. And so it's very easy to change their behavior. You have a quote along those lines. You said, life is not our fantasy predictions of the future or our glory days of the past. Life is that thing that is happening to you as you hear this.
Right.
And I thought, that gave me the chills. It's so true. And the thing that I really hope we can do today, because now I want to go out of storytelling and I want to get into the people sitting in this audience. I'm sure people that you know and love are going to fail. They're going to set a goal for themselves, but they're going to fail. As somebody who has encountered so many people, both that have succeeded and have lost, what are the trappings that take people down the path, and what can we do about it?
There's a couple elements when it comes to this sort of overall health and diet. Variety is one of them. Consistency is one of them. Purpose and a plan and accountability. These are all things that have to sort of be in place for everybody. There's not a whole lot of universal truths in the world. Not everything applies to everybody. We're always trying to make everything so simple and easy to understand so we can all kind of just put our arms around it and, jump on the same boat and go. It's just not the way it is. A Tanzanian marathoner is not going to do the same thing as a mother of 5 who's 35 and never exercised a day in her life.
Right.
Different diet, different philosophy, different focus, all those types of things. I see people walk into a gym and get on an elliptical for 45 minutes or an hour. And I just think, how do you do it? No wonder you're going to fail. I don't know that many people, I'm on the elliptical, it's my 12th year, 5 days a week. The same repetitive motion. Did you have your temporal lobe pulled out of your brain and just stuffed in a box? It blows my mind, So for me, it's about staying interested.
Right.
All right, it's about not getting hurt, it's about not getting bored, and it's about seeing results. That's it. And if those 3 things ever happen to you, you're probably going to quit, and you're going to stop, and you're going to say, oh, woe is me, and you see, I told you so. But to avoid the boredom and the injuries and the plateauing, you've got to have a lot of variety in your fitness because you want to keep your interest up. So you're working on your strengths, and you're also working on your weaknesses. Working on your weaknesses is what ultimately makes you a better athlete and prevents those 3 things from happening. Variety. Consistency is another thing. And I'd call all my friends so I can get my butt up to my gym and make it happen. Accountability through working out with other people. That's everything. You've got to, you are the 5 people you hang around the most.
Right.
You are the company you keep. And if you've got badass, butt-kicking, hardcore, super fun, not too overly competitive pals that just want to gather together and go have some fun with it. That's what's, you just need an infrastructure. Most people don't have it.
Right.
They just have a hope and a prayer, and they buy something or they buy into something, and they're shocked and appalled that 2 weeks later they're so over it. Because they don't have the variety, they don't have purpose, they don't have plan, they don't have accountability.
Let's talk about purpose. If you were going to give me one and I couldn't have anything else, I couldn't have variety, but I could have purpose, that would be the one that would probably get me the farthest with other people if I could help them tap into that. You said it earlier, Start With Why, right? Have you read Start With Why, the book by Simon Sinek?
No.
Really powerful, you'd love it. I think you'd hear yourself in it a lot.
Oh, then I would love it. That sounds a lot like me.
Right.
Very intelligent man.
What is it, do you think, about purpose that makes it so useful?
Well, if you look at purpose, play, and accountability, you look at the list, everybody that works for you, they have a purpose. Right? They love work. They love being.
They don't, and that scares me. I was once stuck in the Matrix. You talked about this, so you didn't say the Matrix, but you said I had this feeling that my life could be more. That's where I lived for a very long time. My life could be more. I'm destined for greatness. But it was empty rhetoric because I was doing nothing about it. And then I got into the hideous rat race of, okay, well, I could see that the world valued money, so I'm going to chase money. I'm going to build this big business, and I'm going to be rich, and it's going to be amazing. And then that came up empty as well, right?
Yeah,
so
totally.
you start going, wait a second. So at that moment, I realized that purpose was the most important thing, but he talks, you guys must check this guy out, his talks. He talks about neurology all the time, which is why I knew that we had to sit down together. You know me, my fascination with the brain, that if you're gonna walk into a gym and you're gonna curl something, you better understand the bicep and what contracting a muscle means and all that, otherwise you're never gonna be able to build it. But the same thing with motivation, purpose, all of that stuff. Are you able to get your mind in the right place to be receptive to the change? And I find that most people aren't. So I want to believe so desperately that all of them have purpose, but they don't. And if you push them on it, they're gonna say, I wanna be happy. Rad, what makes you happy? And they will fall apart. I know because I've done this in interviews. I've asked over 1,000 people what they want out of life. The universal answer, I know you don't like universals, but they come pretty damn close.
Some are important, and then a lot of them exist, absolutely.
And the one that I hear all the time, I wanna be happy, but as you go down that path, people don't know what makes them happy. Talk to us about your journey of going beyond the desire to look good and finally getting to wanting to feel good right now.
Well, the average person who's looking to make a change in their life usually comes down to the aesthetic, comes down to the ego. They figure that if they look in the mirror, they don't like their image. If they change and I'll tell you a great story. There was a guy, and I would follow people online, especially when I could see a lot of change happening. I would kind of keep an eye on them, and every once in a while I'd post, which really helps inspire and get people to, oh my God, Tony Horton responded to my, day 42 picture. But he was a cop, and he was out of the Midwest, and he's 6'5", big guy, but as wide as he was tall. And he saw the infomercial and he bought into it, and the thing works. Obviously, you're working out 6 days a week, doing a variety of things, weaknesses, strengths, and eating better. And so he was one of these guys that did the program, and he'd take a picture every day. He just calculated it, and he was measuring. It was all about the look. It was all about the look. How do I gonna look? And he would work, and he'd work, and he'd work. And his day, like 180 picture, he went through 90. He got great results. He did 90 more, and he was shredded. On his day 180 photo, he took it, and there was the image in the mirror, the image on the screen of exactly what he had always hoped. And he said, I was thrilled, and then 5 seconds later, I was so depressed, I didn't know what to do next. He said, what do I do next?
Was he depressed about not knowing what to do next?
Well, he was depressed because he didn't know what his next goal was. His goal was never about health and wellness and flexibility and agility and happiness and better sex drive and releasing norepinephrine and dopamine and serotonin and not having it be about him anymore, but having it be about something else other than his aesthetic appearance. And if you want to stop gaining, losing the rest of your life, then you have to understand that it's not about you. And that's what it is for me. My purpose is to give other people their purpose.
Still ahead on Inside Quest.
I beg of everybody watching, everybody in the audience, if there's a particular type of fitness or exercise that you haven't done before that you're afraid of, then I beg of you to just jump in. It's not only going to accelerate your results, it's not only going to make you more durable and less vulnerable, but it's also going to change the way your brain functions because you're going to just plain old know more. And I tell people, we spend way too much time thinking about what we think other people think of us. And that's just so stagnating.
Inside Quest continues